Namaste, Assalamu alaikum, Shalom, Ni hao, Buenos dias, Buenos tardes, Hezeche, Aquaba, welcome in. What up, though? This is Cafe Melange, week numero dos, session numero tres. We rolling. So, uh, yesterday we are on a field trip, the weekly field trip. Um, Today we are back in the ashram with all the I'm not gonna call it debris, but the papers. So, anyways, uh, I gave an update about. I'm going with that again. I gave an update about the call with Baha'i brethren. On Monday, I mentioned YouTubers and sharing the favorites and the least favorites of Melange YouTubers that I watched through the years. Um, and again, striving to temper the criticism because I can be harsh. Speaking about that, also again, I started with myself. I gave a review of myself for on Monday, session numero uno for this week, and I said the favorites and least favorites of what I do or what I share. I abstain from mentioning this though, haha. Criticism towards me and what I share, what I say, and additionally, crazy, psychotic, schizophrenic, all that. Um, there's there's that accusation and criticism and opinion against me. Uh, so I just share that for the record. And I also share that it is increasingly widely recognized that such proclamations, such diagnoses, are increasing commentary and testimony against those who make the diagnoses and proclamations than against me. God is the best of judges. At the end of the day, within every day, that is the way. So, with that being said, we get into the YouTubers. I mentioned, I gave some names of some before. I mentioned C-Bud, Casey Bud. I'm reminded of the Cosby Show. Max Capo. Um, Cedric Sky Seti, I think is the name he goes by. I mentioned. There's some I didn't mention. I'm trying to think who else. Oh, Erica Lyon. Um, let's see. Those are some of the ones that are comparatively current. There's a sister who's out of Deutschland, who's in Trinidad and Tobago. Uh, Trini and Deutsch. Her name escapes me at the moment, and I don't know if she's doing YouTube these days at this point because I think she went to La La Land to do her acting joint. That's what I recall. Anyways, her, and then also a news channel or a channel that's new to me, which is her first name I think is Hitomi. Her family name escapes me at the moment, but those are some ones I didn't mention on Monday. But then there are additional YouTubers like 100% Mix Show with Philip Koo and Addicted to Race with Jen Chow Fontan and Carmen Van Kerkhove Signoni, I think her family name is. The Mixed Chicks with Heidi DeRoe and Fenton Cox Di Giovanni. And Multi-Ethnic Association of Southern California, or Multi-Ethnic, Multiracial Americans of Southern California, MASC. They still do it. They posted recently. So there's some additional ones as well. So I'm just gonna I'm going to rattle through the ones that come to mind and share. So starting with the new ones, the most recent ones that most recently update. Here we go. 5 minutes in, haha, nice. So Casey Budd, very interesting. She shares very interesting insight, very interesting experience. She's been doing it for years at this point, and she's still very young. And I don't mean that as a patronizing thing. Just she's been doing it for years since she was in undergrad at university, and she's still doing it. She's evolved. She's matured through that process. Um, so again, my thing is I'm trying not to be like a general commentary. Trying to be like the most favorite video and least favorite video. Um, so most favorite video. She talks about spirituality. So for me, person like myself, being a spiritual diplomat, that's what resonates most. Um, and I appreciate that. I'm trying to think. She went on a trip to Colorado recently. She shared she likes nature. She likes to do bicycling, and so some of her videos she records in those environments. And so and she talks about her breath work, her I think she does yoga, and additionally, but seeing that connection between spirituality, nature, and then technology with the vlogging. Um, that's nice to see, and that it affirms that experience, and it resonates with a number of people because a lot of comments speak to that. Challenges, some of the least favorite. Um, there's a certain amount of is it called thirst trapping, and I'm one of the least to like make a criticism about that, but um, there's an element of that, and I think it's increasingly highlighted because she talks about spirituality. She talks about uh, getting caught up in the worldly things. So even though she is very minimal in how she shares her thumbnails, and additionally, it is increasingly highlighted because of the substance of what she shares. So that's one consideration. She likes to quote the Tao, beautiful, awesome, and her spirituality, beautiful, awesome. Um, but when we do that, we have a heightened responsibility of demonstrating that. So that's one of the challenges. Um, it would also be nice. Well, I'm gonna leave it at that. So there it is. Um, Max Capo, haha. Max is actually a nice dude. It seems like he's kind of like corny but cool, and humorous. He has a ready sense of humor. Um, he also has certain depth because some of his videos are just like comical, particularly his early ones a number of years ago. He's also been doing it for a number of years. All right. And he's been doing it for a number of years. And a number of his earlier videos were comical. Um, but he also has like at lengthier conversations with people, particularly people who are mixed in Japan. And so in a lot of the insight, the experience that is shared is beneficial. So I appreciate that. Um, and those are some of the favorites that I appreciate that he does. I actually appreciate a lot of the humor that he does because it's kind of like corny, but like safe corny. Um, and actually, one of my favorite videos is actually one with little talking. It's not comical per se. It's not an in-depth conversation. It's when he and some friends go rollerblading around Tokyo, and do a recording of that, a video recording of that. And so they just record themselves going around the street. So it's kind of a cool experience, a visual. Um, and So those are some of the nice things. Now here's the challenge, and actually I'm unsubscribed at this point from his channel because in recent videos he's been doing he works out. He does I think it's karate, and additionally, and so he's a fitness guy. And in recent videos, he's showed himself like doing exercises with his shirt off and being comical about it, but still it's like, yo, I'm not trying to see all that. And it's like it is pronounced. So it's it's like, well, when we get past that, then we can holler. So that's where we are at this point. But very much appreciate the things that he shares before that, and he continues to share. He shares some recent posts of a conversation. I haven't watched it yet because I'm taking a break from his channel for the moment. But that's it's appreciated that he shares that. Uh, Cedric Sky City. Now his channel I find most recently, or further recently, like within the past year or so. And he moves from uh, Turtle Island, the this continent, this hemisphere, and he goes to Korea, which is where his mother is born. And he's living in Korea at this point. So he vlogs about his experience there being mixed, and uh, the insight that he shares. He also has interviews and talks with other mixed brethren in Korea and talks about the experience of being mixed in Korea. Um, he's kind of like straightforward. He's into music. He does English teaching recent in past years, but he's branching off into other things as well. And so he posts less frequently than other YouTubers, but much of what he said is just kind of plain spoken. He's like approachable and apparently, and he his manner of speaking is just kind of plain, straightforward, simple, but also seems to be a nice guy. And additionally, so um, that's pretty much the gist of his videos. Um, hmm. I'm trying to think of a video that would be considered least favorite. Um, it's difficult to think of one actually to be off the top. One that would be least favorite. Hmm. Hmm. Maybe delving further into the experience of being mixed. I think a lot of his videos talk about maybe like the surface level of things without getting into like he gets in depth. I mean he's shared a lot of personal information about his family, his background, his far being in the military, and how his parents meet, uh, and additionally, um, so he shares a lot of personal information, but also in-depth information. He talks about his spirituality, his Christian faith, and Christian background, and how he gets started in music in the church. Um, maybe it would what I'm thinking is like for him to speak something about the mixed experience beyond his personal experience, and by personal experience I mean by being other than like a mixed Korean, or being Blasian. Um, that's the most that's the most applicable term I can think of that incorporates the different parts of his heritage, aside from just Hapa. Um, so maybe he speaks to that, and maybe talks to other mixed people, or talks about the mixed experience beyond that. That's the other thing, beyond just his personal direct personal experience, and that includes like reaching out to other YouTubers, and outside of Korea even, organizations, and he has a platform, and he has an audience that is considerable. And by considerable, I don't necessarily mean by numbers, but just responsive. And it seems like he can be doing an additional amount in terms of um, um, connecting with other Melange brethren, um, and from different experiences from the diaspora, and delving further into that experience because he's very readily. I mean, that's what he talks about in on his blog for the most part. Um, so it would be nice to hear to see his. I don't want to say necessarily learning process, but what his what his experiences, what his opinion is regarding the larger experience of being melange, and the different mixes and experiences that exist. Um, so that's one consideration. So it's not necessarily least favorite, but perhaps additionally, what would be nice to see that type of joint. So that's what for Cedric Sky Seti. I also admit, going back to Max Couple, there's something that I omitted. I ain't gonna get it back into it as well, but it the thing that I omitted also um, ex- expounds what I the challenge that I communicate, and so it's not just what I explicitly communicate. There are additional elements as well that make that increasing that augment the effect of that. So I'm just reminded of that. So, anyways, continue on. Erica Lyon. Now, Erica, haha, she is painfully genuine. Um, by that I mean she's just very generous in sharing like her experience. Um, I guess one of the affinities that I experienced in watching her or watching her channel is that she's an alumnus of one of my alma mater, University of Manchester. And so when I first heard her describe that, there's like, oh, Manchester, yeah. And but her personality is very sweet, and she's but she also talks about like some of the challenges that she experiences, and she's honest and generous in sharing information about herself, and that's what I mean by painfully genuine and sweet. Is that you don't want to see someone like that feel bad, and so she doesn't say much negative about anybody, but uh, she talks about some of her challenges with mental health, um, and um, she posts comparatively infrequently, and that's one of the reasons why that she explains before, um, and but anyway, so she talks about being mixed. I think she's also vegan, um, and she's lived in England, obviously, but also she's living in Japan these days. So most favorite um, video is actually she sings one of her own songs, which is kind of a sweet, um, uh, genteel kind of song. And then she also has a recording of where she's singing with her brother-in-law some Beatles and maybe some additional songs as well. Um, so uh, the least favorite probably is when seeing the alcohol. That's probably the most challenging for myself personally, um, particularly because I know the effect that alcohol has on mental well-being. So that's one of the challenges. But she's done some travels and recorded that, climbed mountains and additionally, so um, I think she's still kind of searching to find out what she wants to share and how she wants to share on YouTube. I think she's interested in deriving some income, some livelihood from that, and she's been connected with like agencies to facilitate that process. So I think she's still searching for the path that is most favorable for her interests and her walk. So we continue to uh, support that as she continues on. Um, Next is I'll say Hitomi. I mentioned earlier a few minutes ago. I find her channel most recently again. further recently, within the past couple of months actually. And so uh, when her first video was her in a treehouse, um, and she in that video and some other videos she talks about her spirituality. She's very in tune with Eastern traditions, um, and she has a lot of information about herself as well. Very generous in talking about her experience, particularly with the consideration of other people, particularly younger than her, learning from that. So there's appreciation for that. Um, she's very forthcoming with who she is and what she's thinking, what she's experiencing. Um, she shared some challenging stories about her past, her family history, and additionally, and so that has a tendency of being endearing when somebody trusts others, even just the general public, in a way like that. It's very giving of oneself, and uh, again, she balances that with her spiritual path and the things that she's um, learned and studied and practiced in life. So that's some of the favorite. Now, challenge is she's very sexual, and by I have to be careful how I say this. She presents herself in a very sexual way, um, and she talks about that. I haven't seen her Instagram account, but she talks about posting nudes of herself on Instagram, and it's difficult to hear that, and to be aware of that experience. I abstain. It's not about passing judgment or condemnation, but I'm aware that um, very often people um, revert to such sexual expression as a way of dealing with um, uh, past abuse from others, and the rationalization of it becomes twisted as a way of perceiving it as empowerment or liberty or self-expression, when it's basically simply getting a matter of getting attention, reward in other ways, um, for the things that harm us. So um, I'm not trying. I know very little about her details, her life. Additionally, so I'm not passing judgment, but I know enough about life uh, to see things for what they are, um, and so that's difficult. It's difficult to see that, and she has a large following, comparatively speaking, um, but anyways, I'll leave it at that. Um, One of the things that makes it further difficult is that um, she speaks very readily about spiritual teachings. Again, particularly from the East, Hinduism. She does yoga, if I recall correctly. Yeah, she went to India and went to yoga training school, um, and uh, so she talks. She has a knowledge about spiritual teachings, and so, but she also delves further into kind of fringe teachings from the same traditions that kind of lend themselves towards an acceptance or um, a permissibility um, for the libertine trope, and so that is that is concerning. So that's the challenge that I experience in viewing her channel, and uh, in a similar way with Max Koppel, I think also I don't know if actually I'm unsubscribed because she abstains from explicitly presenting herself in that way, but the things that she talks about, um, and additionally, are along those lines. So, um, I do see a video with her and her sister. That's very beautiful. Where her sister was adopted to another family, and so they didn't know about each other for years growing up, and then they only within recent years found out about each other. And so the video was actually on another channel. Um, what's it called? I think it's called The Deep or something like that. But it's like a convo channel, and uh, so they were talking with each other about each other and like what they know about each other. Additionally, so that was a nice conversation, nice video, and she's very generous and loving and giving in her embrace towards her sister. And so that's nice to see, and that's it's again it's a generous gift to share with others, to see that conversation and that relationship. So that's like it's and again it speaks to her personality, and how giving she is, and how compassionate she is. Um, so that's additional positive pertaining to Hitomi. Um, who else? I'll talk about the sister from Trini and Deutschland. So she's very charismatic. She's kind of like has a carefree, kind of cool kind of vibe. She speaks English with a Trini accent. So when for island speakers, there's a certain amount of like, oh, she legit. Um, and and so that's part of it. But then she also speaks Deutsch fluently, and she lives in Deutschland for a while, for a number of years. She goes to uni in Deutschland, and so she speaks she speaks English with like a Trini Deutsch accent, and so uh, it's interesting. Maybe that might be my honored one bias or whatever, but I just find it interesting. Um, she talks about basically she just vlogs about her life. She doesn't actually talk too much about being mixed. She just says it's a matter of fact that's what it is. But she just basically talks about her life in Deutschland, um, and she's like an aspiring filmmaker. And again, like I said before, she goes on to pursue her acting career. Most recently, I am informed from her videos in Los Angeles, in the land of the Oleon and the Tongva and the Paiute. So, um, positive experience. I think I spoke to that. Kind of charismatic, chill vibe, lighthearted, sincere. Challenge most least favorite. Um, Probably not speaking about being mixed, and she has a little onus of doing it. People don't have responsibility, but just to be honest, it would be nice to see additional amount about that. And pretty at, at this point anything at this point because I'm uncertain if she. I think it's probably maybe been like a year or thereabouts since she's posted. I presume I'm still subscribed and haven't received a notice. So there's that. Um, Next one, Mask, multiracial Americans of Southern California. So Mask is an organization based in SoCal, again, land of the Paiute, the Oleon, and Tongva. And it posts very infrequently, maybe once every few months or thereabouts, or maybe twice a week, and then off for another couple months. And it basically just shows updates about events that are convened in the area of in the area. Um, so, ha 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 ha. One of the things I appreciate is that it's pro families and um, it shares the experience of mixed families. Most of the videos are kind of like just like highlights from picnics and uh, concert events and stuff like that. Um, so the insides, there's little dialogue or discussion or even talking at all. It's kind of like just what's it called, slideshows set to music. um, and some video in there as well. So it's nice to see that challenge, probably something further in depth. Um, Now, Mask is probably one of the most active and prominent mixed organizations on this continent at this point. That ain't saying much because the scene is very quiet, categorically or aggregately. But Mask is one of the larger local organizations. It's involved with national organizations, um, and got some eyelash. Um, so it's a local group, but it's also engaged nationally. Not too much internationally, at least at this point, intentionally, directly, explicitly. Um, so it would be nice to see, I guess, if we go on the least favorite uh, side, it would be nice to see additional. Oh, that yeah, that's the thing. It would be nice to see additional amount from Mask. Um, Particularly because the region that Mask is based in is one of the strongest, highest populated regions of mixed people on this continent. On not on this continent, on this part of the continent, in the United States. And so, even though it already is one of the largest and most active, the consideration is raising the bar even further because it has the strongest constituency base, the most formidable, the largest constituency base, and one of the most highest concentrated constituency bases. So there's a consideration raising the bar, um, and that doesn't necessarily mean doing videos on YouTube. Um, it can be programming it additionally, but sharing that online so that it reaches the larger community on this continent and internationally as well. Um, so that's a consideration with Mask. Um, Hapa Mag. So Hapa Mag forms within the past 2 years or so, and it's primarily focused on being a magazine, an online magazine. So it's not too tough on YouTube at the moment. It does have a number of videos, and it posts quelquefois um, every so often. And to be honest, probably been months since its most recent post that I know of. So things I like. It's a new voice. It's young and kind of cheeky, and shares an insight that's kind of very like boldly Hapa, um, and so that's nice to see. Trying to think if there's anybody, if there are any like old heads or any established people that I know of involved in with Hapa Mag directly. I have to think about that or look into that. But um, the the insight, the perspective, the swagger even is appreciated. So that's some of the favorite. The videos that are shared, actually, a yoga instructional video. Actually, I think those yoga instructional videos. It might be the most recent one done in the past year. Um, and it's interesting because the sister who does the yoga, her name escapes me at this moment. I don't want to say the wrong name either, so I'm not just gonna put it out there. But the sister who does it, um, I mentioned before that like almost a decade ago, not like 8 years ago, 7 years ago, thereabouts, something like that. I put together the multi-ethnic multiplex, and it was just basically copy and pasting videos that were already on YouTube, but putting it in collating it, if that's a word, into a one collection, um, and that could be readily presented to show people what's on YouTube. Um, and so she had a video up at that moment, which was one of her. There's a term for it in the show business industry, like show reels or something like that, but just basically shows clips of her work. And so this was like I think a couple of clips of her auditioning for parts, um, and So that I include her video in that multi-ethnic multiplex, and that was a number of years ago. And then when I see Hoppa Mag start up 2 years ago or thereabouts, I look at the YouTube channel, and there she is doing her yoga. So it's kind of, oh, I remember you, even though I've never talked to her in my life directly. So, anyways, that's just a side note. Um, so I mentioned the nice, what I like, what I appreciate, the favorite, the least favorite. One, a little bit kind of very conventional, and by conventional I mean kind of like assimilationist, kind of in the verbiage, or in like the swagger. I appreciate the swagger, the particularly like the boldness of like, yo, this is Hoppa, and there it is. But simultaneously, it's like, yeah, but we want to be like mainstream. I guess that's the word, a better word that I'm looking for. It's very mainstream, um, and like kind of acquiescing to that mainstream and mainstream norms, and additionally, um, in its messaging and communication. So that's one of the challenges. And then not I'm reminded of the Woody Allen line of this restaurant. The food is so terrible in such small portions. So when I talk about the least favorite about Hapamag, oh, it's so mainstream and they hardly ever post. So that's a consideration. is doing additional posts on YouTube for um, for what it's worth. Um, then it would also be nice to see some collabs with other mixed organizations, and even mixed organizations of different ethnicities. Oh, is this my Laudo bias again? Everything is. Everything that I share. So, yes, there it is. Now, continuing on. I've been at this for half an hour at this point. Let's see how long will we go for that. Anything else going on these days? What else going on these days? I'll share mixed remixed. So mixed remix. Uh, to be honest, it's probably been over a year since this most recent post. But I share particularly because it communicates the intention of having another conference. So it may be beneficial to say what mixed remix is. Mixed remix is a mixed conference, Melange conference in again the SoCal area. Um, excuse me, the land of the Paiute, Oleon, Tongva, and additionally. And it's the conference is I think literature, poetry. Um, I'm uncertain films are included within the repertoire, but it's basically an arts festival, and for mixed people, and it goes on. It used to be on every year, then it was like every other year, and so that's where it is at the moment. And so much of the updates or the posts are like highlights from the conference. Um, so I share that as kind of like a segue in between the current and the archives. So, but again, mixed remix is still going on. Um, Favorites, it's nice to see. It's nice to see the families. It's nice to see the young people. It's nice to hear the voices, the artists, the poets, the spoken word, and additionally the insight, to see the experience of the people, the attendees, and hear the reflections and opinions and experiences of the attendees. All that's nice. What's not nice? How about further frequently? And I know Mix Remix tries to do this, tries to reach out to other people and say, hey, would you like to do this in your area? Would you like to consult with us? And like, or would you like us to consult with you on how to like do this? So I know there's an effort there, and a lot of us are spread thin in terms of our commitments and our obligations. So, but like I said, it would be nice to see. Um, yeah, this thing is in my eye, tough. Not a sign tough, but it is. It's like distracting. So, anyways, Mixed Remix. Now, I also share Mixed Remix because it is organized by one Heidi DeRoe, the Afro Viking sister, and um, she's one of effectively one of the big wigs in Mélanger, particularly on this continent, because she is a published author who writes a book. I have it here. Hey, I know, I know, I know, I know, I know, I know. Here it is. Oh, it's even hardback, hard copy. She writes this book, um, and gets well, uh, re- well reviewed, um, nice reviews, and she's able to parlay that into um, programs where she shares recommendations, suggestions, guidance for others to also be published. And she utilizes that as a platform for mixed remix as well, to be able to network accordingly. She's also got a law degree, and so she has that kind of savvy. Now, additionally, she is part of a duo, a partnership, historically, with one Fanchon Cox Di Giovanni. And the two sisters, Heidi and Fanchon, are self-proclaimed as the Mixed Chicks, and there is a Mixed Chicks channel on YouTube that has many, many, many videos because they recorded many, many videos on a number of different topics. Periodic annoyance, um, and they talk about and actually the festival, if I recall correctly, started a number of years ago when the Mixed Chicks were still active, um, and they talk about literature. They talk about Mélanger figures in history. So very informational, informative, uh, and entertaining, lighthearted, kind of, and certainly professional and like well kind of uh, presented. So uh, that's another reason why I mentioned mixed remix as well. So talking further about the other part of that duo, that partnership, Fanchon Cox Di Giovanni. She continues on. She has a theater production, a one-woman show called One Drop of Blood, or maybe just One Drop, or One Drop of Love. The words "one drop" are in there, and she goes to different places around the continent, sharing her show, and she posts on YouTube actually as well, and uh, I didn't do favorite, non-favorite, and mixed chicks. I said favorite. That the information, the congeniality, and like the homie experience. Feel like welcomed into the home, like a mélanger home. So that's appreciated. Now the challenge with mixed chicks, not doing it. Where is it at? The archives are nice, but we it'd be nice to see little expectation of that happening, but there it is. And to be honest, when it was going on, maybe have an additional. I don't, I'm not gonna say anything about it in the past because there it is. So um, it could be the mixed dudes thing, but that's whatever. So continuing on with again, Sister Fanchon Cox Di Giovanni. She posts some vlogs about her theater production, and some of her insights. She posts very infrequently as well. Um, so she actually, I think, posted maybe a month or two ago, but that was after like a number of months on hiatus. So um, she's like one of the OGs, so to speak, the new OGs. And so it's like she's done a lot already. So what do you expect? Um, And so, yeah, what are the favorites? Again, she's very congenial, um, and she just carries that experience and that insight that's valuable and shares it accordingly. Um, Haha, what is the least favorite video or aspect? You know what? I didn't say this with Heidi, but it applies to Heidi as well, and the mixed remix. Um, it's the same criticism or concern or challenge that I communicate with Hapa Mag, um, mainstream, and I'm trying to gauge like the levels of conformity between Hapa Mag and mixed remix and one drop, and it's I mean it's different. It's negligible, I think, to discern the distinction of the degree of conformity between the two, and any distinction therein because of the degree of negligibility may be also attributed to my melange bias. So I just say it's kind of comparable. So based on that, it's appropriate for me to say it as well, to mix remix and to run drop. Conformity, and conformity to not necessarily a Eurocentric homogeneic norm, but kind of conformity to minority status within a mainstream Eurocentric homogenous norm, and a liberal kind of proclamation and quote unquote defiance within that minority status of a Eurocentric homogenous norm. And so the consideration is, yeah, we are the world. Haha. Remember what Michael Jackson said. Um, we are the world. We are the earth. We are the norm. Um, and it's not a matter of being bold or immodest or arrogant or conceited or egotistical. That's the fact. The earth is the norm. And it's appropriate for us to acknowledge that, to be that, to live up to that, to teach that, to study, practice, live it, um, and to share it. So that's what I say. Who else on this joint? One more 3/4 of an hour. I'm trying to do the mathematics. There's another fraction there. It's not just 3/4. I think it will be reduced to 3/4. Yeah, 6/8, 9/12. Yeah, something like that. Anyways, it's been almost an hour. So let's see. We keep on rolling though. How about that? Um, who else? 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 I mentioned yesterday or Monday. The sister again. Her name escapes me, but she does the Mulatto Diaries. Uh, I want to. Again, I don't want to guess the name and be wrong about that. So I'm just gonna say the dear sister. Uh, she shares a number of vlogs. She was vlogging tough for a while, a number of years ago. Probably, like I said, over 100 or so. And I've probably seen many of those. Maybe even probably the majority. I don't think I've seen all of them, but I've seen a lot. Um, and she talks about her life experience. She talks about being mixed regularly. I mean, that's the premise of her show. But she talks about her life experience and additionally, but very readily about the mixed. And again, it's kind of a personal kind of diary, like she says, a diary type of situation, um, and very generous in what she shares about herself and her experience, particularly for younger people who can be increasingly encouraged and affirmed through what she shares. Favorites that she shares. To be honest, it's been probably years since I've seen a full video of hers. She it's been probably years since she's posted, and I think she posted maybe a couple years ago and did like one like, "Hey, I'm back," and then it's like, cricket, cricket, cricket. So she was posting regularly, thoroughly for a number of years, and then maybe about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, kind of stopped. Came back for a minute and then stopped again. Um, so favorites. To be honest, it's nothing. It's nothing like extraordinary, but it is extraordinary, and but that's what's endearing and charismatic. So she talks about when her dog her one of her dogs dies, and her sadness about that. She gets a new dog, and she shares the new dog. And the other thing is that her the one who passes away. She was on the video a lot as well. So she shares that experience. The one that actually stands out in my mind is the one where she talks about a concert that she goes to, and I don't think it was a Sarah McLachlan concert. Maybe it was a group that opened for Sarah McLachlan, but it was along that kind of vibe. And so she goes to the concert with a friend, and so she invites her friend to be on the vlog with her to talk about the concert. And they were talking about their experience in dancing to the music when everybody else was just standing still. I guess they were dancing to the music to the singer that they were there for, but who was opening up for the main act, and it seemed like the most people were there for the main act, and so it was a different kind of crowd and a different kind of culture than what that opening artist was brings, and they were part of that crowd that the opening artist brings, and so they were dancing and being that culture, and they were amidst another culture that was very different, and they were like, "Yo, why isn't anybody dancing?" So it was amusing and rememberable. How about that? It was rememory. Anyway, all right. So that's favorite. Least favorite. I don't like that name, yo. Come on, what's up with that? We know better. We know what that's a. We know what that is. We know what that's saying. Why do we keep on perpetuating it? And I know a number of people have a number of actually sisters. There was a sister who made a documentary that had the name in there, and we know what it means. We know what it's saying, and so we don't want to say the word "and," do we? And as a self affirmational kind of thing. So why do we do that either? Um, so that's one of the challenges. Should I leave it at that? I can go with the oh where you at again? And again, people got lives, yo. They got live. What you expect from people? Um, but anyways, that's what I can think of at the moment. Um, what else? What else? What else? I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I mentioned on Monday. I didn't write any of this down. Uh, what am I talking about? 100% mix show. What am I talking about? With Philip Koo. Um, all right, and I remember another one now. So 100% mix. So again, dozens and dozens, probably maybe 100 thereabout uh, episodes. Maybe not 100, maybe thereabouts. But he probably Philip Koo and his crew, Koo and crew, um, put together a very formidable channel on the Melange experience, like straight up, outright Melange. Um, and what's further impressive is that it's a melange mix of all different types of melange. So he's Hapa, Chinese and Deutsch, and through his work through the years, he travels a number of places and he meets a lot of melange people, and he interviews people. He does short interviews, a couple minutes. He does extended conversational, like podcast type joints. I participate on that on both formats. So there's my bias as well. Um, and that's impressive for him to reach out to mix people of many different types of mixes, and be very conversational, charismatic, and humorous and insightful in the conversations and in the interviews. In some of the interviews, it's not even him talking; it's just an edited version of a person speaking to the camera. And sometimes that the person sent to him, so he doesn't even conduct the interviews himself on occasion. Um, many interviews of many different types of people with many different types of experiences, but all melange. And so that's nice. Um, so I think I reached out to him a number of years ago after seeing some of his videos, and eventually I do one of the short videos. What happened? Actually, I told him about the Critical Mixed Race Studies conference. Wow, was it 5 years ago now? What? Wow. Uh, T Tempest Fugit. Anyways, so he I don't think he heard about it at that point, or maybe he heard about it just like in passing, but he makes the decision to go. So he and I have been in communication up to that point, but then we actually meet in person at the conference, and that's where he does the short interview with me. And um, but he already knew a lot of the Melanger brethren at the conference, so he just kind of connected accordingly. So, anyways, but yeah, very thorough in terms of the outreach and the representation in the videos that he shares. He does humor, and that's like I think one of the first videos that kind of started the channel off outright. He did some stuff when he was at university back in the day, or I shouldn't just went back in the day for that. Um, and then when I think before 100% Mix Show was actually started, or thereabouts. But when he like then he did a video, a comical video. Um, what was it's called? Shit that mix people get. I think something like that. When people were doing those type of joints a number of years ago. So he did one with 100% Mix Show, and then from that, it was like a platform for doing the interviews and additionally. So that's when things got started. Um, so there's humor, there's insight, there's just life experience, there's a pluralism of representation within the Mélanger experience. People from literally all different, I should say it literally. I will say literally all different types of Mélanger mixes that include Arab, um, Israeli, Asian, East Asian, I think Indian as well, African, European, Latino, Indigenous. Uh, there are. Is that all the types? That's enough to be included as that. So he has interviews with brethren from all this, and some of these in-depth interviews. I mean, he interviews brethren with the Metis. I think they weren't with Métis Nation. I was thinking Métis National Council. They weren't with the Métis National Council directly, but the brother that he interviewed does uh, research and provides information about Métis history and culture and the Métis Nation. So um, that's just one example, but he he um, he reaches out to Mélanger people from all different types, from all ilks. How about that? That's impressive, and that's probably one of the most favorite about the 100% Mix Show. Um, Least favorite, I'll say two things. Again, where is it at? It's on hiatus. It's on pause. Well, actually, he was on the first session of this joint, so he continued to represent. However, as he says on the first session, he's like, "Yo, man, it's tough. It's tough to do. Keep doing this kind of joint. Like, yo, he's put in his work. And when cats put in this type of work for a community, the community's supposed to support that and like be like, look, we appreciate that. Keep on doing it. Um, we need it. So it's only when we do that proper like and thorough like that we get reap the benefits accordingly. So um, there's that. Now that being said, like I said, that's not what I'm going to say for the least favorite of the videos. The least favorite of the videos. This is a little bit of an advanced kind of critique, um, but I think part of what allows the congeniality and the outreach to the different communities in such a charismatic and like appealing way is kind of like a a very liberal mindset. And I'm not saying anything wrong with liberal mindset, but along with that liberal mindset comes things like partying and this, that, and the other. And so I know a lot of us like to do that. And I ain't saying I never did it in my past. But like I said, this is next level because it's difficult for me to think of anything else. But my thought is that um, one thing that could be done is emphasize discipline and ethics. And this is my bias again, but everything is going to be. Um, Emphasize ethics and discipline uh, as a way of cultivating the endurance of doing mélanger, keep continuing the outreach, and further building our community, our infrastructure, our institutions to continue the work and the support, the convo, the way of life. So there's that. Next joint is Addicted to Race, aka Racialicious, aka something else. Um, this it was a venture. Again, it's basically defunct at this point. This was a venture, and I'm not sure if it's actually available on YouTube at this point. It may be. I'm uncertain, but this was a venture conducted by Jennifer Chow Fontan and Carmen Van Kerkhove Signoni. And so these two sisters, actually Jennifer Chow, wow, tough, like 15 years ago, actually going on 20 years ago. I don't mean to call out people's ages, but like nearly 20 years ago. Yeah, she organized a group called Swirl. Philip mentioned it in the first session of this series. Um, First week number one. Swirl. Swirl was a social networking organization that had chapters in a number of different cities around the continent for mixed people. Um, and Jennifer Chow organized this, based out of New York, the land of the Haudenosaunee. And uh, so it was getting some traction, and obviously it had a number of chapters. So her personal network was extended, and and it builds, it does some things. It had a website, and additionally, and from that, she started with Carmen. Um, I think, and this might have been just as YouTube was starting thereabouts. Um, they started a podcast, basically, is what it was. The podcast was called Addicted to Race, I think it was called. I think it had two names, Racialicious and Addicted to Race, or the name changed at some point. Anyways, and it was a podcast about being mixed, about being mélanger. Again, this is like a decade ago. So this is like old, back in the day, almost two back in the days. Um, and uh, she was around during the time of Maven Foundation, and additionally, so this was like the next wave of that was starting like 20 years ago, and the podcast was nice. I mean, particularly because what else was going on at this point, at least on this land, um, and very interesting, very intellectual, um, and conversational. It was kind of like if Heidi DeRoe and Fanchen Cox Di Giovanni are the mixed chicks, um, Mo Laudo style, then Jennifer Chow Fontan and Carmen Van Kerkhove Signoni are like the mixed chicks hoppa style. And I don't mean to reduce it to those terms because both groups of sisters abstain from offering themselves as a specific type of mélanger. It was just a mélanger thing, but it just happens to be that um, Heidi and Fanchen are Mo Laudo mélanger, and Jen and Carmen are Hoppa mélanger. It's all mélanger. Anyways, but I just say that because conversational, the podcast is very interesting, and with a certain amount of success and receptivity and resonance with the work they do, they started getting and offering themselves as multicultural consultants and do presentations. in the local area, and that goes on for a little while. But then again, I think what might have happened is that Carmen got married, and so she has other focuses, and then Jen gets married, she has other focuses, um, and so the two kind of actually I think they sold the Addicted to Race podcast, and I think at that point it was called Racialicious. They sold it to somebody else, and I don't think the other people were actually um, committed to Mélanger specifically. And in the podcast, Jen and Carmen would talk about being mixed, but they would also just talk about race in general, and maybe that's the appeal that the other group had for continuing the podcast. But it continued on as kind of like a race topic rather than a specifically Mélanger topic, kind of based form. So that's what happened with that. Favorite, again, the intellect, the conversation, particularly when there's a very quiet front. Um, this is like pioneering type stuff, particularly even when social media was in its nascent stages. Um, so just that kind of chutzpah to have um, uh, to do it, appreciate that, respect that, um, love that. So that's some of the favorite. And to be honest, it's been years since I've listened to one of the podcasts. So it's difficult for me to think of a specific topic that comes to mind. But least favorite, probably, again, not doing it. Uh, yeah, again, it's one of those things of like, it would be the least favorite of what was done rather than, or least favorite pertains to what was not done rather than to anything that was done per se. There were differences of politics and opinion, and additionally, but again, there's just appreciation for the form existing and supporting it accordingly. So um, I leave it at that. Um, Anything else? I'm unaware of Maven having a YouTube channel per se, or even having an archives. So I abstain from sharing that. Groups like the Hapa Issues Forum, American Multi-Ethnic Association, I'm unaware of there being any archives. Um, I'll say that I'll share this one. Sid and Dina. How about that? I think. Well, so who are Sid and Dina? Um, Sid and Dina are a Muslim couple, married couple in England, um, and uh, actually interethnic couple as well. Um, Dina herself her far is Egyptian and her more is British English, and Sid is Pakistani, and so they talk about that being mixed. Now it's not the thing they talk about most of all. They don't talk about being Muslim for the most part, um, but they do like say this is a thing, and actually it is a thing in the Muslim community as well. And so they talk about that experience and talk about the differences, the cultural differences between Pakistan and in Egypt, and additionally, so it's relevant and there's that insight and beneficial insight. Actually, very valuable insight, particularly considering the religious aspect of it. Um, so now I'm obligated. Most favorite, least favorite. Hmm. Most favorite. Candor. They're just very honest, plain spoken. They're kind of like of the people, but still very religious. I think both abstain from growing up very religious, but once being married and kind of settling down, start becoming increasingly observant and speak to that effect and don't pretend about it. And don't pretend to be the most knowledgeable Muslims and this and the other, but do share what is known, what the couple does know, and says that well, yeah, we didn't actually do this growing up, but we don't recommend that. We recommend this. So again, there's appreciation for that kind of honesty and candor, and very British in kind of like the culture and like the talk and the references, but also very Muslim, and so it's a very interesting insight. Particularly, it's part of the Mélanger experience, the diaspora, and so that it's nice to see that. Least favorite. Again, it's difficult to say. Well, I am going to abstain from saying applying the least favorite notion to something that was absent from what they share. Because I could say, oh, talking with other people, this and the other, but that's not necessarily what the channel is about. So I can't like critique or criticize too tough for that. Um, what what I say what it is. Now you can take this for what it's worth, but this is just what comes to mind. The least favorite post or episode of the vlog. Now they've been doing it. They did it for a number of years, I think, but it's been a number of years since they've done it. So there should be an archive, I think. But in terms of any recent posts, I'm unaware of there being any. But I remember this one episode, and it was actually like they did vlogs, and it wasn't necessarily like, oh, we vlog on Monday and Thursday. They're just like, we do it when we do it, and you get it when you get it. And so this was like something that happened to Sid, and they talked about it for a number of episodes. But basically, he went to a barbershop, had an adverse experience at the barbershop, and then talked about it. And when he talked about it, people found out about it, and then started like bringing it to the attention of the barber, and the barber got like basically um, ridiculed within the community for treating Sid badly, and that's not necessarily what Sid was intending to do, but just because he had that audience, that's what happens. And so he talks about that, and he talks about being contrite, but then he also doesn't necessarily like even in recognizing the effect and seeing the adversity that the barber speaks, he doesn't he like pulls back, but he doesn't retract. And not it's difficult to like talk about the details, but I think he was still a little bit insulted from the barber, and it was difficult for him to kind of like take the upper take the higher road, and just say squash it or whatever. So, anyways, that's just what comes to mind in terms of like a challenge, most challenging episode or post. I'm gonna leave it at nah. Come on, let's do something else other than that. What else we got? I already said me, so can't stop with me. Who else? What else? Where else? Uh, critical mixed race studies. Not too don't know too much stuff about like updates on YouTube, so can't speak to that. This is what I'll do. I'll talk about. I'll share some thoughts. Um, I just have this bag here that I carried. It was heavy, with books and DVDs and stuff. So as I share this insight, I'll just flash a number of these things for people's awareness. Lots of stuff. Yo, I carried all this for miles, for kilometers. So I mentioned before having the discussion group yesterday. It actually goes well. A number of people stopped by. We got combo, and so it is the second week that we do it, and we're building momentum, so that's positive. So the insight that I have to share is based upon the experience of doing this second discussion group. So I'm just gonna flash some stuff as I talk. So in doing this, I pass out flyers, and I'm careful on how I pass out the flyers, because let me do this because I do it in the area of a university where I graduated. Um, However, universities can be very proprietary when it comes to students, so I don't do it on campus. I do it near campus. But even then, we've got area police, campus police, and this and the other. So, oh, what you doing? What you doing? What you doing? So I'm mindful of that. And also, I ain't got a lot of flyers to share. So I'm being increasingly concentrated and intentional with who I share the flyers. And so a week ago, I shared one flyer. Earlier this week, I shared one flyer on that occasion, and I shared some flyers with people that asked for it directly, who I talked with. Um, and here's a thought that I have about that experience of um, sitting on a bench out in the public and having conversations about being mixed. Um, One, I say hi to everybody. That's just what I do off rip, and it's actually a little bit uncomfortable for me to sit in public with the intention of like having a thing to share, because then it makes my highs to seem increasingly calculated. Like, oh, he's just saying hi because he wants this and the other. So it's difficult for me to sit there and with the intention of sharing a flyer, but I'm doing it because it's legit. Um, some of these you might say, well, that's not melange, but guess what? It is, and it's beneficial to have that awareness, to have that conversation. Oh, um, so I go out there, I hand the flyers. I sit out there, I say hi. Then my protocol is, if I see somebody that looks like they might be melange, whether it's Hapa, whether it's Blasian, whether it's um, colored or whatever. uh, if it's a dude, I might say excuse me. Um, if I wave to him and he says hi back, then I pretty much readily say excuse me. But if I wave, he doesn't even look at me and he continues on, but he still looks mixed, I might say excuse me for a second. If it's a sister, um, and she doesn't look my way at all after I say hi, I ain't saying nothing. If I say hi and she looks at me and she looks like she might be melange, then I say excuse me. Then I say something like, "Do you know what hapa is?" or "Do you identify as being mixed?" or something along those lines. Um, Now I've only approached in that session in that context. I've only asked that. There are probably this past week there are probably about 100 people thereabouts, maybe further, that walked by me. Um, and out of that number of people, I've probably stopped. By stop, I mean excuse me, maybe two or three, maybe. I stopped one who didn't actually. I didn't stop one because she didn't seem to be melange, or at least identify as being mixed. Um, and so I say hi to her because I say hi to everybody, and then she sees that I have stuff with me, and I have a sign. Oh, it's under stuff, so I ain't gonna get that. Games, games, games. Um, so she sees that I have stuff. She says, "Oh, so what are you doing here?" I'm like, "Oh, here it is." So we talk about it, but she asks, she approaches me, and then when we had that conversation, she communicates interest. She said she's gonna show up, but maybe it was another week she was intending. Um, I think I showed this. Um, then, so she and I talked for like maybe 20 minutes. We had a nice conversation. Uh, but that's my protocol. That's like the basic thing that I go by. Um, Now, I have recognized a certain inefficiency or inefficacy in that methodology because it relies upon me to do much of the work in soliciting and initiating the conversation. Because otherwise, people have little idea what I'm there for. I have a sign, but the sign itself is just a heart with the peace sign in it. That's it. Um, so, what I plan to do for the next time, God willing, I will bring a sign with me, but in the sign, I'm just going to say, "Are you mixed?" So that people can see it, and if they identify as mixed, then they can approach me and say, "Yo, what's that about?" Rather than just me picking and choosing from my eye who I think might be, or who I think might identify. So that's what I plan to do, and I plan to do the same thing, hire everybody, but then there's additional impetus for people to approach me. So that's what I plan to do. Here's something that I learned about about being mixed, being melange, in just what I've done already. Um, it's a provocative thing to like sit on a corner and like proclaim a racial identity. regardless of what the racial identity is. It's like somebody going up and saying, "Hey, this is Italian," or "Hey, this is Chinese," or "Hey, this is that," and just being pro whatever the ethnicity is. Who does that? Maybe an organization does that. It might be an ethnic organization, but usually it's not just a matter of just playing out and spoken like this is the ethnic identity and this is what it's about. Usually it's like an issue that affects the community and it talks about the issue, because in this PC multi-culti environment here on Turtle Island, we talk about our differences and mixtures and this that, and the other. However, when it comes to actually like identifying it and proactively advocating and affirming that identity, it becomes offensive, because then the response is, oh well, so you don't want other people to do this, or are people of this thing welcome? And it becomes like a game kind of a gamesmanship. Um, and so there has to be this equal opportunity thing for all people. And that's not a shot at affirmative action per se, but it's a matter of recognizing how ludicrous the rationales get and how debilitating the rationales get. So whereby nobody can be any kind of ethnicity at all in along those politically correct expectations. So here I am being mélangé. And what's this about? Oh, it's about being mélangé. Oh, what do you talk about? But though, seriously, mélangé. Um, got a whole list of topics. This is what we talk about. See how many times they got mélangé on that joint? So um, it's provocative to just proclaim and like approach people with the intentionality of talking about a specific ethnic identity. However, that being said, if there's any ethnic identity that can do it, that can carry it off, it's mélanger, because mélanger is all ethnicities. There are no boundaries. There are no borders in mélanger. There are lines. Lines are drawn. Anybody can draw a line in mélanger, but there are no borders. There are no boundaries. There's no limit that says this is mélanger and that's not. It's based upon people's proclamations, but it includes all ethnicities, um, literally. So it's on the strength of that truth, particularly, that I do this, and the strength of the truth that it's needed amongst Mélanger, but amongst the earth. And so that's what I do. And not done yet. Um, so I do that, and um, what I learn, what I learn, what I learn. I just had this before I did this. Here it is. So this is the interesting thing. Oh, it's interesting. Being mixed and like being identifying as being mixed, mélanger. It takes decades for me to arrive at that personal identity, at that political identity, that ethnic identity. But even then, it's done so still in a very ambiguous way of like, oh, I can be this, I can be that, I can get along with this, I can get along with that. And so even though there's frustration of like, where's my group at, or where can I build, um, and still work and still dealing with that, even amidst that, um, there's a certain freedom. There's a certain there's a freedom in the floating. I can be at peace here. I can be at peace there. I can be this there. Yeah, there may be uh, asterisks or um, uh, demotions or whatever else in fitting in any of the other different pockets. But in the experience of floating, I always have that liberty of and that option. Oh, I can. It could be here. It could be there. It could be here. When I'm sitting on the corner and proclaiming mélanger, I am entrenching myself within the identity within the community of mélanger, and I feel for the first occasion like the exclusion of the others that I could be a part of. Or like, oh, that's who you are. Okay, there it is. That's where you are. All right, you're not this and then. And I'm feeling that when I do that, when I'm out there proclaiming mélanger, when I talk about it. Um, Even if I abstain from making that proclamation, people are making that decision accordingly. Yeah, he's not one of us. Aha, all right. And it's an interesting thing. It's actually a beautiful thing because there is that tangibility of like belonging to a set, a group. Um, but again, there's that feeling of exclusivity. So I continue to say, mélanger is everybody. Mélanger is all ethnicities. That's a further accurate way of describing it. And again, part of the nature of the way I share the definition of mélanger is by blood or by bond, meaning a person can proclaim and identify as being mélanger by blood inheritance, by where one's parentage is, but also by bond, by relationship, by how one identifies. And there are ebbs and flows and nuances within that, but that's part of the nature of mélanger, and part of the awareness and the awakening of mélanger is like it's other than for us to exclude or discern or define what others are, because we ourselves know what that those who are mélangés know what it's like to be defined by others, and so there is that experience of not defining one or excluding one who proclaims it. If one proclaims it who's comparatively homogenous and seems they just want to be done because it seems cool for the moment, there's recognition of that, and there's temperance of like the authorization or the ascension in the hierarchy of authority in the mélanger experience. But if one's been doing it for years, is in a mixed relationship, and additionally, wait a minute, that carries some weight now. So it's either by bond or by blood or by bond. And if somebody proclaims mélanger, that's the bond right there. So, anyways, I continue to do that. I continue to identify as the earth, but I'm feeling, and additionally, like being labeled as mélanger, as a distinct and exclusive or finite kind of category of ethnicity or political identity. So again, it's an interesting feeling. It's an interesting experience. And when we have these mélanger discussions on, particularly in person, where there are other people talking, um, it feels increasing like, yo, this is a thing. And it's like, oh wow, okay, there's a responsibility with that. There's weight with that. It's like, okay, so then what do we do with this, and how do we answer that? Because we can't expect another group to do it because we're not claiming that group, um, or we're not claiming exclusivity within that group, or that group's not claiming us. So yes, like this. All right, shit is real um, as well. Um, that's what I experienced the past couple of weeks, particularly this past week in the discussions in handing out the things. Uh, and there's so much further to do, but that's much for the moment. You don't think that's a mélanger joint? Haha, you know better. Now this is the actual documentary. This ain't the make story based on on actual events. This is a documentary of the actual people. This is actually Richard and Mildred Loving. That's the actual ones. So, a needle pulling thread. That's it. That's it for today. Oh, we kept it under 2 hours. Fantastic. Um, as the brother from Cameroon says, à la prochaine. Namaste, assalamu alaikum, shalom, zaijin, adios. Te jakri se sempre na asmo keleko fred. One love and peace.